had to control everything. I had to control it from beginning to end. I had to be able to manipulate it.
I was having a hard time moving forward. I was paralyzed by a lot of fears.
I was going through the motions as a Christian, but not being the Christian. The real Denise had some ugliness in her, some things about myself that I didn't even want to know because I'd buried so deep.
A lot of people have the misconception now that it's a drug and alcohol program and that's where those people go. It's so much more than that.
The people that come through Celebrate Recovery, the majority of them are Christian. They love the Lord, but they don't know how to handle these hurts, these bad habits and hang-ups.
I still had pride issues. I was still a people pleaser. I still was more concerned with what other people may think in opposed to what God would do.
In the past, I've struggled with many different types of sin. Anger, codependency, looking at the wrong thing on the internet.
Self-abuse, cutting, it could be self-hatred. Eating disorders is huge.
We have times in our life where we feel out of control. Is there any hope for me? Or is this it? Is this as good as it's going to get?
The Celebrate Recovery meeting is where I really feel that I get spiritually connected.
Because I know I'm entering into a place where there's no judgment.
You work on whatever those hurt habits and hang-ups that you may have, you have a chance to work on them in an isolated situation.
We've seen people who came in that were so broken, so down, so hurt, and to watch the transformation is just remarkable.
So we launched our new Celebrate Recovery ministry 2 weeks ago. The first Sunday they had 18 people with them, and then last Sunday it grew to 23 people. In a church this size, that is phenomenal. 23 people on week 2, that's your cue to clap. And so 23 people in a church this size is amazing for week 2 of a new ministry. It's something to celebrate. I'm absolutely thrilled with what I'm seeing there. Today, some of you might have, lunch plans afterwards. Maybe you're already planning on going out after CR today. Others of you may be like, today's a good day for me to go to Celebrate Recovery for the first time if you haven't tried it yet. So awesome job to all of you. And then we're going to hear a mini Moni today, a mini testimony from Sue, who is a mom here in our congregation and a leader in Celebrate Recovery here at the end of my sermon. And this is not a Mother's Day sermon per se that I'm giving today, but you will hear a mini Moni from Sue here as a mom in a little bit. It's been an eventful week for me and my family, and I'm thankful, and my heart is full today. My boys played in a talent show, their school talent show. They played an original song together. My big guy down here, he played synth and sang, and they just did an awesome job. And then my little guy played a baseball tournament last week while I was on video. So thank you for letting me be on video. And I'm going to share a little bit about that baseball tournament here in a few minutes and why I'm glad I was there. And then an amazing thing happened. The new Pope is from Chicago. I mean, what about that, right? That's interesting. We're a Protestant church. We're not Catholics, but the Pope is an important figure in the world. And now it's a very American and very Chicago thing. Within like 5 minutes of announcing the new Pope, reporters were interviewing his brothers. Okay, is he a White Sox fan or a Cubs fan? Which one is it? Which is the most Chicago thing ever, of course. And I saw a picture on social media that communion will now consist of deep dish pizza and beer. That's cool. I'm down with that. And then as soon as I heard he was from Chicago, I knew, like within minutes, T-shirts and merchandise, it's going to be for sale. And I found a picture already. Somebody sent this to me. The Pope, the Bears, the Pope. So we knew that was coming, but just an eventful week for the United States. And again, while we're not Catholic here, the Pope is an important figure, and it seems like maybe this choice is about helping the United States to navigate through the times we're in and help the world navigate through the times that we're all in. And so we're praying for anybody who has influence and leadership in our world. And today is actually a communion Sunday for us. I'm sorry it's not pizza and beer, maybe some other time. But if you didn't get a chance to grab a communion cup, they're in baskets at the top of the aisle. I know it's a little dark when you walk in here. You can pop up out of your row at any time. We're casual in here. You can pop up out of your row and grab a communion cup out of a basket. We'll take communion at the end of the service. If you're online with us, I really do hope, if you're online, that you will take communion with us. I'm not just saying that. If you grab a piece of bread and a beverage, we would love to have you take communion with us at the end of the service. So today is the third week of our series on Celebrate Recovery, healing from your hurts, habits, and hang-ups. I'm excited about what's already happening in this series and what is still to come. So every week I've been saying, or asking, I guess, this question: who is Celebrate Recovery for? Everyone. Now, we know about Alcoholics Anonymous, and we know about NA and other programs, and in the name, you can tell who it's for. Alcoholics Anonymous is for people who are struggling with, chemical dependency and so on. Celebrate Recovery is for everybody. It's not just for people who struggle with, what you think of as the typical recovery issues. It's for everybody, because everybody, regardless of who you are, where you come from, whatever your experience has been, all of us have hurts, habits, and hang-ups, as they say in CR, in our lives that we would like to be free from, that we would like to heal from, that we would like to recover from. All kinds of things: grief, pain from the past, again, hurts, right? Habits, hang-ups, things we would like to get past, anger issues, trouble forgiving, trouble moving on. I hope that today is great for you, that Mother's Day is great for you. The truth is, it's not for everybody. And there may be things that you're feeling on a day like today, and you're like, man, actually CR addresses those hurts, habits, and hang-ups that I feel on a day like today. And in this series, we're going through the 8 principles of Celebrate Recovery. You have 12-step programs, and then you have the 8 principles of Celebrate Recovery, and they come from the Beatitudes, the blessed are statements that Jesus gives in Matthew chapter 5 in the Sermon on the Mount. And you're going to discover why everybody has a hurt, habit, or hang-up that we want to be free from, and how God can do that in our lives. And so this is a series that can quite literally change your life. So to review quickly here, the first principle of CR is to realize I'm not God. I admit I am powerless to control my tendency to do wrong things, and my life is unmanageable. And we said on week 1, that language can be difficult sometimes for people who are more, progressive Christians, so to speak. Like maybe you come from a toxic, religious and shame and guilt environment. And the language of personal growth and that kind of thing can maybe be triggering for you, because it makes you feel those guilt and shame feelings like the past. But what we're doing here is we want to get past denial. Like we all have things in our lives that we would like to grow in and heal from. And we want to get past denial. And Jesus tells us if we're willing to get past denial and acknowledge those things, to acknowledge our own spiritual need. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for they will see the kingdom of heaven. Then we can experience God's healing. And then last week talked about the second principle of Celebrate Recovery, which is to earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to him, and that God has the power to help me recover. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And we kind of defined mourning. If you know that this world is not as it should be, that life is tough here, life's rough, and that affects us personally too. And there are things in our lives that we wish we could change. And if that's the case, that's the definition of mourning there that Jesus gives in Matthew 5. And it's a promise: God will comfort you. If you trust God, even at your lowest point, perhaps the most powerful prayer you could pray, I said on the video last week, is, God, if you're there, please help me. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's you. That's the second principle of Celebrate Recovery. Today, the third principle of Celebrate Recovery is this: that I consciously choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control. Now, that care word sounds pretty good to us. The control word, I'm not quite so sure about that one. The care word sounds pretty good. On a day like Mother's Day, it's a good day to acknowledge this, that while dads care, of course, I deeply care for my children and the people around me, that there are maternal images for God in the Bible. It's true in the Old Testament. It's also true in the New Testament. Jesus talked to the city of Jerusalem and said, how often would I long to gather you together like a mother hen would gather chicks under her wings, but you would not let me. Jesus refers to himself with that maternal image. And then in John chapter 4, Jesus says, God is a spirit. And people who worship God in spirit and in truth. In other words, God doesn't have a body. Like people picture what God looks like, and it's like an old man with a beard. It's like a ZZ Top in a robe, basically, up in the sky. Well, that's Zeus from Greco-Roman mythology. That's not the God of Jesus Christ, right? The God of Jesus says God is a spirit. God doesn't have a body that would make God male or female. God doesn't have parts that would make God male or female. Genesis tells us in the image of God, in the image and likeness of God, God created everybody. Everybody is in the image and likeness of God. That can be kind of a mind kind of concept for people to grab onto. So there are maternal images for God. When we think about committing ourselves to Christ's care, that word control can be a little bit more challenging in principle 3 of Celebrate Recovery, but we're going to talk about what it means. And it comes from Matthew chapter 5, verse 5. Again, it's the third beatitude, the blessed are statements. And it's this. Jesus is on a hillside speaking to his disciples, and Jesus says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now, these are poetic statements, easily memorable statements. It's easy to understand why somebody could hear Jesus say this and just remember it and write it down, decades later. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now, this word meek is one of the most misunderstood words in the Bible. And for a pastor, it's kind of maddening, to be honest with you. Like, people still misunderstand the word meek so much. There are people who think that meek means weak. Meek does not mean weak. Let me clarify this as much as possible. The word meek does not mean weak. A way of maybe remembering this is that the opposite of meek is weak. So would you be willing to say that with me? The opposite of meek is weak. It's really important to understand that as we think about committing our lives to Christ's care and control. And I want to control my life. I want to control things around me. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Here's what it means to be meek. To be meek is to have the inner strength to restrain yourself. It's to be able to have some kind of control over yourself. And for some of you, maybe if I had control over myself, I wouldn't be in recovery. Like that's the exactly, precisely. And we'll get there in a little bit. But to be meek is to have the inner strength, which is the opposite of weakness, correct? It's to have the inner strength to restrain yourself. A classic sermon example is like a horse that allows its owner to ride it. A horse is what? Like 4 times the body mass of a human being? Like if a horse really didn't want you to ride the horse, it doesn't have to let you ride it, correct? Are we all in agreement? A horse, it's much larger and stronger than a human being, but a horse is able to partner with a human. We've been doing it for thousands of years. A horse can choose to restrain its power and partner with a human being. That's what it looks like to be meek. Another example might be somebody who is a black belt in martial arts. And they're out some Saturday night and somebody gets mouthy, and the person who's a black belt in martial arts realizes like this wouldn't be an issue physically for me. But instead what they do is they walk away. They realize I don't have anything to prove. I don't need to get in a fight to prove myself, my worth, my abilities. They choose to walk away. That's a great picture of being meek. They could win the fight, but they don't need to. Meekness is the inner strength to restrain yourself. So say it again with me. The opposite of meek is weak, right? Meekness actually displays immense power, inner power, to restrain yourself or to perhaps commit yourself to the control of a higher power. To be meek is the capacity to resist anger and retaliation, revenge, and it requires an enormous amount of inner strength to practice meekness. I know it's Mother's Day, but just by the way, meekness is a great masculine quality for men to have. The ability to control yourself, the ability to stay cool under pressure, to stay level-headed and not just fly off the handle, get rattled, right? Meekness is a great quality for everybody to have, both men and women. You think about just different examples, situations of high conflict where people have the choice to be meek, office politics and just, the kind of the rat race, climbing the ladder, that kind of, this person said this person, and you have an opportunity there. You have a choice whether you want to choose to restrain yourself and be meek. You think about people who are going through divorce, and there are people who will they'll get so sucked into this anger and revenge that they'll even use their kids as pawns, to try to hurt their ex, out of revenge. They didn't even realize they're doing it. They're just like blinded by rage. But meekness is the ability to restrain yourself and do what is right in the times that we live in. It's easy, isn't it, to get sucked into the extreme levels of emotion and anger in our culture and dehumanize people we disagree with, isn't it? Now, notice it gets a little tense because when you talk about this, because there are issues that we feel so strongly about, political issues and so on, where you have to speak out. You have to. The right thing is to speak out. It's the way that you speak out, the way that you view other people who disagree with you, the way that you disagree with people that makes all the difference in the world. You can disagree and protest and be an activist and do all the things that we should do without hating and ridiculing people you disagree with. Can I get an amen on that? It's tough, isn't it? It's very, very difficult. But I've said this before, and it's just so true. If you feel like you're fighting a monster, you have to be really careful that you don't become a monster in that fight. Meekness is so important. The inner strength to restrain yourself. So I'm going to share why I'm glad that I went to my son's baseball game last Sunday. And I appreciate your understanding. He's got a couple more games coming up here in the next month. And then next fall, we kind of worked it out to where he's going to be playing less on the weekends. So it's not going to be as big of a deal for me as a pastor, and I'll be able to be there, and a lot of his games will be on the weeknights. So I appreciate your patience here while we finish up his season. But last Sunday morning, he played in a tournament, and they pitched him on Sunday morning. It's the do or die game. If they lose, they go home. And, here Ryan goes bragging about his kids again. You're exactly right about that. But he pitched on last Sunday morning. And I think what happened was the other team believed that they were just going to waltz through the tournament. They actually had a guest pitcher who was 2 years older than my son. Not sure how that squares with the rules exactly, but he was 11, big kid, and he did really well. So they brought in this guest pitcher, and I think they thought they were just going to cruise through this tournament and win the championship. So in 3 innings, I know some of you aren't sports people, some of you are. In 3 innings, my little guy threw 55 pitches, 43 of them were strikes. That's a 78% strike ratio. And then this team, they thought they were just going to cruise. And so he starts striking out these kids right and left. And then maybe a couple of them hit grounders. And our boys did a great job of playing defense and got outs and held them. And the score was tied 1-1 in the 3rd inning. And then the other team got a couple of hits off of my son. And I was in the dugout. I'm a dad coach. I was in the dugout, and I had my phone out videoing my son on the mound. And the third base coach for the other team, if you don't know baseball, the other team's third base coach is standing next to third base while their team is up to bat. and he was just a few feet away from me. And when they got those couple of hits, he started really acting up. Like, it was bizarre. Started yelling, flexing to the crowd. Like, it just, you don't see that in youth baseball. Like, it's just bizarre, aggressive, like fighting kind of behavior. And he just really started ramping it up. And a dad on our team, whose son was playing third base, right? So you got the third base coach who's acting a fool out there, and then you've got this other dad on our team whose son is a few feet from him playing third. That dad on our team walked out onto the field, and he was like, "Hey man, these are a bunch of 9-year-olds. Like, calm down." And he was right about that. And I'm going to show you. I kind of wondered whether or not to do this, but I don't think you can really see faces. The first couple of seconds there's sound, and then the rest of this minute-long video there's no sound. So I'm going to go ahead and we can go ahead and play the video here. So as we think about meekness. So here's the guy in red, and that dad says, "Yeah, hey man, these are 9-year-olds. Come on, dude, calm down. These are 9-year-olds." The guy in the blue, that's one of our coaches. He's a great Christian guy, church grower. He's trying to de-escalate the situation. Here comes one of the umpires, and then you see why I muted the video. Can you use your imagination? Blankety blank blank blank. I'm gonna blank. Here comes another guy. Blankety blank blank. Get the blank out of here. Just a lot of cursing, a lot of aggression. Here comes some more guys. Now, in fairness, most of the guys who came out on the field were trying to de-escalate this. That's how it works with dudes. It's kind of the dude code, right? Most of the guys out on this field are trying to de-escalate the situation, but you've got a few guys here who are cursing and getting all loud and aggressive and threatening. Somebody called the cops. That's how intense it got. Just a handful of guys acting like knuckleheads. And all of our boys are out on the field. My son's on the mound. About half of the boys on our team, these are 9-year-olds, were starting to cry. And our franchise owner came over to the dugout, just right around here, and he's like, "Nope, pull them." You see our boys pull off the field. We forfeited the game. We're like, "We're not doing this." Cops are on the way. You don't get the full picture because the video was silent of how loud and aggressive that was. After the game, I was talking to my son, and he was having he was out on the mound, in the middle of all this, and he was having a hard time calming down, and I was trying to kind of help him through. And "Did you feel like you were in danger? Is that why you're crying?" And he's like, yeah, I thought they were going to hurt me. And I was like, "Well, bub, I had a cell phone in one hand, and I had like 10 baseball bats right next to me in the dugout. Nothing was ever going to happen to you. You were in no danger in any way." That's why I was glad I was there. I said, "I got a good church. That's why I'm here this morning." And now that other team has been banned from 2 tournament organizations for the rest of the season. And again, most of those guys, including the guys for the other team, were actually trying to calm that down. But you had about 3 or 4 guys there. And that's what it looks like when people choose not to be meek. And I show you that video to make this point because, like I said, it's kind of maddening that people don't understand what meek is. A lot of you could probably just close your ears for the next 10 seconds. Maybe I'm talking to a few people who really need to hear this. In a situation like that, with just that handful of guys, you either choose to be meek or you look like a moron. That's the choice. That's the choice. It's that stark of a choice. You either choose meekness or you end up looking like a moron. Somebody who's scaring children, making kids cry. The Chandler cops get called to a youth baseball game, the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen personally in a youth game that I've been a part of. To guys who think they're tough guys, you either choose to be meek or you look like a moron and you hurt a bunch of children. That's the stark choice that we're talking about today. That's the importance of meekness in this world. You think about people who aren't meek. You think about Vladimir Putin. He's this small guy who, if he meets with a female head of state, he manspreads, to try to whatever he's trying to do in attacking another country. You think about the conflict between Israel and Gaza, and it's just a few people making those decisions. It's been going on for 3,000 years. Again, you think about office politics. You think about people in broken relationships who just start to hate each other, and their kids are the victims of it. But they don't see that, right? Because they're not making the conscious choice to be meek. You see cliques and you see gossip and destroying people's reputations and alienating people and all this garbage that we see in our world that causes so much suffering and pain in our world. It's because they didn't make the choice to be meek. And you have to make a choice. Because the default mode of human behavior, because of some little reptilian part of our brain, is for it to completely go off the rails and make a bunch of kids cry who are trying to play baseball, good Lord, because some guys forgot to make the choice to be meek. So the opposite of meek is what? Weak. So Jesus says the meek will inherit the earth. So what does that mean? And it's actually pretty easy to understand once you get into the context. I won't belabor it, but inheriting the earth is another way of saying inheriting the land. And it's an allusion to the children of Israel going into the promised land and taking over land. It's like Putin invading Ukraine, right? It's taking the land, right? Like usually it's by conquering another country. And you take land from them. Jesus says, blessed are the meek, which is the opposite of weak. Blessed are the meek, people who can restrain themselves and control themselves, and they're kind and they're humble and they're gentle, and they don't get all loud and violent in front of a bunch of kids and make kids cry. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. Well, that's different. That's not the way this world works. You think about all the big shots who try to act tough, and they take the land, so to speak, right? Whether it's get out of my face, man, next to third base, or it's invading another country, or it's alienating somebody or mistreating somebody. When Jesus says the meek will inherit the land, it's a way of saying, it's a big concept, but it's a way of saying that in God's world, the way God works, it's not by being a conqueror and getting all loud and violent or tearing somebody's reputation apart or isolating somebody or playing office politics or dehumanizing people, or all this kind of, it's not those people that actually inherit the land. But Jesus says it's people who choose restraint and control and gentleness and humbleness and kindness. Those are the people who allow God to come in and work in their own lives and work in the lives of other people to make their lives better around them in a way that is easy to see, actually, whether people are religious or not. That it's the meek, people who control themselves and restrain themselves, that actually are the ones who should be ruling the world, inheriting the land. People who act all loud and they want to invade other countries unprovoked and this kind of stuff, how are they viewed in history? How do you think Putin's going to be viewed in history? How's somebody in your office viewed who is just nasty and mean and mistreats other people all the time? They're not inheriting anything. Temporarily. You might look at them and I don't know how that person gets ahead. I'm not sure how they're still employed exactly, but they got a promotion, holy cow. But eventually, everybody knows who they are. They don't have people's respect. They're not really leading anybody, right? If they can fire you and take your paycheck so they can threaten you, that's not leadership. They don't have they're not really ruling. They're not really inheriting the land. People who dehumanize others and they're small, they belittle people, they abuse people, they're not inheriting anything. Everybody knows who they are. Jesus says you will have a better life and you'll create a better world around you if you have the strength to commit yourself to Christ's control instead of trying to control other people. That's the bottom line. When it comes to recovery, to healing, to just getting along well in this world, to being the kind of person who's not in constant conflict with other people, as much as it depends on you, right? But to choose meekness. I'm going to restrain myself. I'm going to take the high road. I'm going to practice gentleness and respect. I'm going to stand up and speak up for people who need that. Oh, absolutely. It's just when I do that, I'm not going to dehumanize others like they're dehumanizing me. Right? I'm not going to hate. I'm not going to return hatred for hatred. I'm going to refuse to hate. I'm going to speak up. Oh, loudly. But it's the way I do it. I'm going to choose meekness. And Jesus says it's those people who actually inherit the land, inherit the world. Those people are the ones who inherit respect and true leadership and health in their relationships. And Jesus, in this third step, invites us, or this third principle of Celebrate Recovery, invites us that this is my way of life. It's like Jesus is saying, this is how I operate. This is who I am. I'm meek. And you can commit your life to my care and control. If you feel like it's out of control, if you feel like you can't get past whatever hurt, habit, or hang up you're dealing with. If you're in a situation where on Mother's Day it just hurts, Jesus says, I'm meek. And you can commit yourself to my care and control. And you can trust me. You don't have to be like somebody who's just out of control and scaring little kids, right? You don't have to be somebody whose life is spinning out of control. But you can consciously choose to commit your life and your will to my care and my control. That's the invitation that we have in this third principle of Celebrate Recovery. And blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now I'm going to close with a mini Moni from Sue, who is a part of our congregation. Come on up, Sue. And Sue is one of our leaders here at Celebrate Recovery, and Sue is a mom, and I heard Sue's mini Moni weeks ago during the info meetings, and this is something that's really going to benefit all of us today. So now that Sue's up here, let's really welcome Sue. It's a long walk up here, and so I'm going to step over there, Sue, and Sue, I'm going to let you give your mini Moni. Here you go.
Hi, I'm a grateful believer. And I struggle with codependency, anger, control, social anxiety, depression, and grief. And my name is Sue. Hi, Sue. I came from a loving family with a lot of laughter, but I struggled to fit in at school, and I never really had a best friend or felt like I had very close relationships. I wondered if I was gay, and I created more distance from others as I did not want anyone to find out my secret. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase, and I tried to bury it. I was struggling with depression, and I had suicidal ideation from the age of 12. I had a girlfriend when I was 18, and then I became a Christian when I was 19. And now I wrestled with how I can still call myself a committed Christian if I was gay. The message from the church was that I could not be a Christian or be saved if I was gay. Was I really rejected by God and going to hell? I did not know. I prayed that God would take this from me. Although I had never once felt any condemnation from God, only from people in the church, I felt I had to make a choice between the two. I chose God. I wanted to get baptized and went to a church meeting about it. They said if you were in a homosexual relationship, you could not be baptized. I broke up with my girlfriend and got baptized, hammering a piece of paper on the cross that day with the words homosexuality. I tried to be straight for the next few years. Well, that didn't work. Go figure. I had so much self-loathing. I would binge drink at times to ease the pain, and I fell further into depression, which led to a suicide attempt in my late 20s. A couple of years of study, soul-searching, and having supportive friends, I finally accepted myself for who I am and realized that God loved me and made me exactly the way I was. I no longer struggled with suicidal ideation. I accepted myself as a goofy, socially anxious, distractible gay woman who was completely loved and treasured by God. I finally felt I could be my authentic self, no longer living a lie and building walls between people I cared about. I felt free. Fast forward, I got back together with that girlfriend I had broken up with, and we had twins. I would have liked to have gotten pregnant, but I could not since I was taking medication for breast cancer. My wife was hospitalized for 3 months during her pregnancy, and the twins were born prematurely. Shortly after, my wife began abusing substances. Early on, I was in and out of denial and was ashamed, and in the beginning, I did not share with my family or friends what was really going on, and I was isolated. We separated when the kids were 5 years old, and I started to come to Celebrate Recovery with my wife, only to get her to go to meetings. She stopped going to CR, and I realized I needed to be there as much as she did. I did not know where else to turn. I was a single mom with 2 kids who were a handful. I found support at CR. There were times that I was too scared and socially anxious to share, but I kept going. Over time, I shared more, grew relationships, and got support. My wife and I eventually divorced, and I was raising the kids by myself. They were in kindergarten at the time of the separation. They were having behavior problems at home and school. The school was calling me on nearly a daily basis. Both myself and the school staff were at a loss how to handle their behaviors. I was a mess, and I was snapping at them. And I took a mental health leave of absence from work to get my son and daughter services and sought help. They were eventually diagnosed with autism. Parenting kids with special needs was one of the most difficult things I had ever done. And while the kids were my joy, there were times that I thought my life was a living hell. I remember the kids screaming, crying, and clinging to me in the hallway at school while staff pulled them off of me. And I turned around, walking away, listening to their cries, so ashamed, as I tried to hide my tears walking past the front office staff. I would also often cry on my way to work after dropping the kids off at school because either my daughter was refusing to get out of the car, or Thomas, due to his sensory issues, would scream, throw off his shoes, and wrestle out of his car seat, and I would need to repeatedly pull over to strap him back in. Once he threw his shoes and hit me in the head while I was driving, and conveniently for him, it bounced off my head back onto his lap, and he beamed me with him again. True story, yes. I can laugh about that now, but there were so many times I just felt like a failure as a parent. Over the next few years, I tried to get my ex-wife to let me take the kids when she was actively using substances. DCS got involved and the kids were placed with me. The problem for me was when we had the kids before we were able to marry in California, and I had no legal rights to my kids. At one court hearing, all I felt was despair as I was watching everyone else discuss the well-being and future of my kids and not being able to say anything. Raising my hand in court and having the judge ignore me, and then being told that I was placement for the kids and I was not a party in the case. And she threatened to have me leave court if I didn't put my hand down. I was helpless to the whims of the state and the court, but I was not hopeless with CR. I desperately tried to control my situation, having no control over the safety of my kids while they were in my wife's care. When it was her days to take the kids, I lived in fear for their safety. My sponsor in Celebrate Recovery helped me to realize that living in fear means that I was not really trusting God. One of the verses I clung to was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will set your path straight. CR helped me to surrender and let go and give my kids over to God's hands and find a sense of peace when they were in her care. I struggled with trying to keep my kids with me and figure out how to take care of their needs and survive parenting in chaos. It was so difficult finding time to work full-time, provide, be an advocate, and try to have a sense of normalcy for the kids and stay positive for them while attending multiple meetings for the kids, like medical appointments, counseling, PT, OT, CFTs, DDD, DCS meetings. If there was an acronym, I was there. At one point, I counted 20 meetings I attended for the kids in 1 month. I was burning out. Over the years, Thomas was making progress, but my daughter deteriorated. My daughter was struggling, and there was times of physical abuse towards me. Calls to the crisis line and police had become a regular occurrence. 5 years ago, at age 14, my daughter went to treatment and then decided to no longer live with me. Now they refuse to call me mom and rarely speak with me, which is a constant hurt in my life. Looking back, I do not know how I got through it, but I know I could not have gotten through it without CR. I found people who walked alongside me and encouraged me without judgment. I found hope in the midst of chaos. I've had a lot of victories along the way as well. Probably the biggest was that I was finally able to adopt my son 2 years ago when he was 17. Love you, bud. Through Celebrate Recovery, I became a better mom because I was taking my frustrations out on the kids less, and I was more present with them. I've been able to stop myself before I make the same mistakes again that I did in the past. I learned to accept the things I cannot change instead of fighting to try to get my way and get control and creating more stress for myself. I recognize patterns in my relationship and my tendency to be codependent and a caretaker. I began to catch myself before I act out my resentments in passive-aggressive or manipulative ways. I am less angry. I learned how to show myself and others more grace. I know now when I get stuck in my head with my own stinking thinking to reach out to my accountability partners before it sends me spiraling down into depression. I learned that you are only as sick as your secrets, and we are not meant to go through this life alone. James 5:16 says, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. So that you may be healed. Instead of saying sins, I'm going to rephrase it and say, confess your hurts, habits, and hang-ups to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. All of us have hurts, habits, and hang-ups. So I encourage you to check out Celebrate Recovery for yourself so that you may be healed. Thanks for letting me share.
Was that amazing? You can see why Sue's mini-moni was perfect for this principle today. You can easily see throughout her life how she has chosen to commit her life to Christ's care and control. And then there were churches who'd be like, no, you can't do it that way. You got to do it a different way. And then she would journey toward that and figure out what it means. And you see meekness, you see restraint, you see self-control, just a perfect mini-moni for this principle today. So the third principle of Celebrate Recovery is I consciously choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control. We're going to take communion together. So if you have a communion cup, if you didn't, you can feel free to, there's Marty right there with the basket. Thank you, Marty. Marty would bring you one. And if you're online, I really hope you will participate with us today. Just grab a piece of bread and a beverage. And Jesus chose restraint in his actions that led to the cross, and we believe his resurrection. And there were times, certainly, we know this from the scripture, when his disciples thought that all was lost, that they didn't understand his choice of meekness. But here we are 2,000 years later, inspired by Jesus, knowing Jesus, following Jesus, in relationship with Jesus, because Jesus was meek and inherited the land, has been probably the primary influence on this planet. And so as we take communion together, we remember that he shared a meal with his disciples the night he was betrayed. He picked up a piece of bread, he thanked God for it, and he broke it. And he said, this is my body broken for you. Let's eat of the bread. And in the same way, he took the cup, he thanked God for it, and he said, this is my blood shed for the forgiveness of sins. As often as you drink it, remember me. Let's drink of the cup. I invite you to pray with me. Oh Lord, thank you, first of all, for Sue's courage every step of the way in her journey to constantly choose to commit her life and will to your care and control. And Lord, the story that Sue shared today is so inspiring, because you can understand as you listen to it why those choices were difficult along the way. But Sue made the right choices to get to this place. And now as a leader in CR, inspiring other people, Lord, the choice to be meek, to restrain ourselves, to open ourselves to your care and control, it's a choice, because the default mode is just to go off the rails like a couple of these knucklehead dads in the baseball game, and it just ends up causing pain and misery We see it all over our world. Lord, we want to accept your invitation to consciously choose to commit our lives and our will to your care and control, Lord, because blessed are the meek, the people who restrain themselves, the people who think about their actions, Lord, the people who want to go your way and not just try to control everybody and intimidate and try to get our way all the time, Lord, but to surrender ourselves, commit ourselves to your care and control. And Lord, when we do, like Sue, time and time again, decision after decision after decision, Lord, we experience you helping us to inherit the land, the life that you have for us, the joy that is on the other side of pain, the resurrection on the other side of the cross, Lord, and now being able to be an inspiration to other people. Those of us who are struggling, Lord, see ours right after the service. We can go right there and have this kind of community, Lord, and we thank you for what you're going to continue to do in our lives through this series and through CR. In Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. Amen.